Welcome back to Go Gaddis Real Estate Radio right here on AM 920 The Answer. I'm Cleve Gaddis, and the purpose of this show is for me to give you as much clear and concise information as possible about Atlanta real estate so you can be confident in the decisions you make. In this second segment, we've got questions on the real estate purchase and sale agreement in the state of Georgia. Got 5 or 6 different questions that listeners ask. Unfortunately, I don't answer them quite often enough on the radio. I need to make more time to do that. If you want to connect with us, we want to be friends, and it's simple. Go to gogaddisradio.com. If you have questions or comments or something you want to push back on or challenge, if you want to share some ideas or ask that we include your neighborhood in our neighborhood spotlight, or subscribe to our podcast or sign up for our YouTube channel, you can do it all at gogaddisradio.com. I'm not giving listener names on these questions because I got too many and I'm going too fast, but the first one is, what exactly is the GAR, Standard Purchase and Sale Agreement, and why is it used the most in Georgia real estate transactions? The GAR GAR Standard Purchase and Sale Agreement stands for Georgia Association of Realtors. So the purchase and sale agreement is written by the Georgia Association of Realtors, and it is most commonly used in the state of Georgia because most people who sell real estate in the state of Georgia are a member of the Georgia Association of Realtors, a local board of realtors, and the National Association of Realtors, which is NAR. And it's used because that is just what most real estate agents use. Now, a non-realtor member cannot use, without paying a fee, they have to pay an extra fee, but they cannot use the standard Georgia Association of Realtors purchase and sale agreement. So in many cases, the paperwork, the contracts come from the listing service or come from a third-party vendor that provides all of the paperwork. And so agents can go in and upload or open forms that they can populate data on, and it's either the Georgia Association of Realtors Purchase and Sale Agreement, or it is a different version which is similar to the Georgia Association, but it's not the Georgia Association's version. So I hope that answers the question. It's used most because most people are realtors. Most people selling real estate are realtors, and that's what they are in most cases required to use. Next question is, who writes this contract and how often is it updated? And it's written by the legal representatives or the legal counsel for many, many years. It's been Seth Weissman of Weissman. I think it's called Weissman Associates now. It used to be Weissman, Nowak, Curry, Wilco over the years. And he does it, and Ed Blumenthal works on it. I don't know if they're still doing them, but they write those contracts, and there is a contracts committee with the Georgia Association of Realtors. I would say there are updates to the contract, multiple updates every single year. The contracts have changed so much in the 20 years, 25 years that I've been a real estate agent. They really don't work even similarly to the way they used to, 25 years ago. If you have any thoughts or ideas on changes that you would like to see made to the Georgia Association of Realtors, you can always get in touch with a person who is a member of the Georgia Association of Realtors, and you can ask them to communicate your suggested changes to the forms or the contract committee of the Georgia Association of Realtors, and I'm sure they would be happy to consider it for sure. The next question is the agreement designed to favor the buyer, the seller, or is it neutral? I would say in Georgia it is neutral, except Georgia is a buyer beware state. Georgia is a state that assumes you as the buyer have the obligation to verify any and all information and to do whatever due diligence and home inspections and research that you need to do in order to satisfy yourself that everything the seller is telling you is true. So in that particular way, I would say it favors the seller because it is a buyer beware state. But generally, the agreement is really fairly balanced. All the time frames are clear. The seller doesn't necessarily have a particular advantage. Now, the seller situation is different because a buyer who puts a home under contract typically has a due diligence period, especially in today's market. And during that due diligence period, it's really a period where they have the the exclusive opportunity to buy the home, but not the unconditional obligation. So if they find something during the due diligence period, they can terminate the contract for any reason or for no reason at all. The seller does not have the ability to do that at any time during the contract, just to terminate it. But the buyer does. The buyer also would have contingencies in place, maybe, and we'll talk about this later, but maybe a due diligence period, maybe a financing, maybe an appraisal contingency, maybe contingencies for other things. And if those things are not delivered and fulfilled by the seller, then the buyer would have the opportunity to terminate the agreement. So I think the purchase and sale agreement in the state of Georgia is really neutral. I think from a buyer beware standpoint, that is something that everybody should be aware of. As the state of Georgia says, you as the buyer should do all of your research so that you understand everything you need to know. Do I like that? Not necessarily. Is that the way it is in a lot of states? No, not necessarily. There's a lot less regulation on real estate contracts and obligations in the state of Georgia than there are in many, many other states. Next question is, why should buyers and sellers take the time to really understand this contract before signing? I will tell you that I have had many, many people over the years who probably understood, nothing about what they were signing. And I just wouldn't do that. If it were me, I would want to understand. So at a minimum, I would want my agent to go through paragraph by paragraph and give me sort of the general meaning. What am I agreeing to with this particular paragraph? As sort of the maximum, I would suggest that it might make sense to actually read the agreement. I get questions from real estate agents all the time, and they say, what happens if X, Y, Z happens? And I don't do this, but what I want to say to them is read the dang contract. The contract, the purchase and sale agreement, spells out pretty much everything in the agreement between the buyer and the seller. And especially if you're buying new construction. Now, talk about a one-sided purchase agreement, one-sided for the seller. If you buy new construction, the seller rules the roost. They are making it very difficult for you to be able to do anything that falls outside of the parameters of how they like to work. And if you're buying a new construction home, then you need to maybe have an attorney review it. At a minimum, have the agent present to you all of the language that they believe is very, very one-sided. So, for example, when you inspect a new home, you can present a copy of the inspection report, but you don't have the opportunity to ask the builder to make any of the repairs. The builder reviews it. The builder makes decisions based on codes, and then the building codes. And then the builder makes those repairs, and you don't have the ability to terminate if the builder doesn't make you happy. And I'm not saying you can't change that in the agreement, but that's not the way they are written. So regardless of who you are, what you're buying, when you're buying it, review what you're signing and know all of the details about everything that you're signing. There are so many buyers who come to the table buying my listing, so many sellers who I represented the buyer on over the years, and the agent nor the seller had a really good understanding of what had been agreed to. And sometimes it's almost comical because they think they can do this, or they think it works a certain way, or they think the deadline is calculated a certain way, but all of that is spelled out in the agreement. So when in doubt, read every single word. When in doubt, read every single word. Next question is, how is the purchase price and method of payment spelled out in the Georgia Association of Realtors agreement? It is spelled out only in numerical form, so it's not actually spelled out. It shows in little section 2 of the purchase and sale agreement, the purchase price of the property to be paid by buyer at closing, and that would have a number, $sign followed by a number. Then it outlines the monetary contribution from the seller toward the buyer's closing cost at closing. Also in this same section, you will specify the closing and possession date. You will specify the closing law firm. You'll specify who's going to hold the earnest money and the amount of earnest money. If you want to know how much that is in the state of Georgia, I would say the amount of earnest money is typically 1% of the purchase price. Lately, I've been seeing more than 1% of the purchase price coming in as earnest money. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I think it's a good thing because in many cases, you want, as a seller, for the buyer to be as committed as possible, and the agent and the buyer should also want the buyer to be as committed as possible. And if they have to pay $10,000 in earnest money and that runs them off, then they might not be the ideal buyer for the home anyway. The method of payment is the default method of payment in the contract is all cash, paid at closing. So if you do not add an exhibit that spells out the financing and the appraisal contingency or any special VA or FHA or USDA paperwork that goes with it, then basically you're agreeing to pay all cash for the property. So if you're getting a loan, you need to have the purchase of the property, your purchase of the property, contingent upon whether or not you can get your loan. We just answered this question in the last question, but what is earnest money? How much is typical, and what happens if the buyer doesn't deliver it? Earnest money is the amount of money that a buyer submits with the offer up front to show the seller they are acting in earnest. They are acting in good faith. Earnest money, typically 1%. A little bit more is what's been happening lately, and it's designed to make sure that the buyer does what they're supposed to. They're tying the seller's home up, taking it off the market where the seller can't sell it to someone else, and that is the earnest money to show I'm acting in good faith. I am being earnest in this. If the buyer fails to deliver the earnest money, they can deliver it within a certain time frame. But if the buyer fails to deliver that earnest money within the time frame, then the seller has the ability to give buyer notice and to terminate the agreement. They have to give them X number of days, and I don't remember the exact amount, but they have to give the buyer X number of days to make the earnest money good. And if the buyer doesn't do that, then the seller has the ability to terminate the agreement. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're still answering questions on the Georgia real estate purchase and sale agreement, so stick with us. We'll be back.